books? No. They aren't out. Let's see, they're not here now. So, lama la dila kaso shadin choptik de. Chi hirbe. Shadin choptik. Oh, doji chanji kokora. So we are getting the prayer books ready now. Didi kaso de tango mare. De kaso miligegora. Tip korangore. Do we need the prayer books? Oh, they're not out yet. I think Lama is getting them. So we're a little disorganized, as I was saying before we turned the microphone on. It's a Saturday on a holiday weekend. And we have been inconsistent about having these weekend teachings. I have been inconsistent about being here. All right, thank you. So we will begin with the Vajradhara lineage prayer, which is on page 6. I think it's the first one in the book. The very first one. O dorje chanjen telo narotam marba mila chije gambo du som sheja gunjen garma pa cheje chunje jirba zenam tang drita tsa som balden roba so sablam chaja chelang anyeben nyame drogen namo kajula solvadep so kajulamanam Jupadzino nam tharajinjilo shenlo gomji kangbar sombashin senor guna jajen me patam tsende de ta chebe gom chela nye kur shen ba me bar jinjilo bogo gomji kowar sombashin menga dergo jebe lamala junda sovadebe gomshena German mogu jewar jilo yang me gomji ngujir somba shar tombe ngo so ma te ma je de gar drobe gom chelam gom jalo tan nam do ngo che gur som ba shin ji ma yin ji liang char va la mangaro bar charve gom chenam korde me do bar jinji lo kewa gunda yang da lama tan dal me chegi pala lonje jim satang lam ji yende radzon dorje change gompan yor tosho dorje change gompan yor tosho the Dharma expanse palace of Akanishta is the essence of all Buddhas of the three times, who shows me directly my mind is Dharmakaya. I prostrate to the glorious exalted Guru. Please bless me and all beings that our minds become the Dharma. Please bless us that the Dharma become the path. Please bless us that the path dispel confusion. Bless us that confusion arise as wisdom. And so now let's, when we begin, let's start by first remembering our motivation. As I usually say, the thing that determines the benefit we get out of, the most determinant factor for the benefit we get out of anything we do, especially Dharma activities, is our motivation. So please try to have the pure motivation of wanting to bring genuine benefit to yourself, perhaps genuine benefit for the future, perhaps genuine benefit of achieving liberation, the genuine benefit of achieving Buddhahood, or the benefit of bringing all sentient beings to the state of Buddhahood. And so with as good a motivation as you can, please listen and consider the Dharma today. And it struck me, I was of course trying to think about what to speak about this week. As Buddhists, well, this isn't exactly how the train of thought goes. It came to me. The order didn't come to me like this, but basically this is the logical sequence. As Buddhists, we have to understand what the Buddha is, who the Buddha is, what makes a being a Buddha. And if we understand, only if we understand what a Buddha is, can we really understand what a Buddhist is, right? Sometimes people have the idea, especially in traditional cultures, like there are some people from East Asia who have the idea of like the Buddhas being just, their traditional version of God. People from, South Asia, people from the Himalayas, quite a few of them, they sort of think of Buddha as being a god. And that's not, and then actually in the Hindu tradition, often they describe Buddha as being just an emanation or an avatar of a god. But for us who are Buddhists, that's not how we think about the Buddha. When we think about the Buddha, what do we mean when we think about the Buddha? We mean a being who started out just like ourselves, absolutely no different from ourselves. And then, because of training for a long time, became a Buddha. So what do we mean by a Buddha? It's like the word Buddha itself talks about, a Buddha as being someone who has awakened. The word Buddha, one meaning of the word Buddha is to awaken. Awakening from the sleep of ignorance. So someone who has removed all the ignorance in their being. And when there's no more ignorance, because ignorance is the basis of all the faults, then there are no more faults. You think about it, all your desires and hatred and pride and so forth comes from misunderstanding, thinking that what is not a self is a self. That is ignorance. So there's no more ignorance. When there is no more ignorance, then there are no more faults. Another meaning of the word Buddha is a completely developed. Developed all of the qualities. So what are the qualities? Well, the qualities are basically just the inherent nature of love and compassion that we all have within ourselves that are covered up by all the different qualities, right? It's kind of like if you have a diamond that's in the middle of the ore inside the earth. They haven't mined it yet. There are just a few places on the earth that produce diamonds, and there's a bunch of rock, and inside that particular type of rock, there are diamonds. As long as the diamond is in the rock, you can't use it as a diamond. You can't, what do you make? I think there's some industrial uses for diamonds. You can't use it for any of the industrial uses. You can't make jewelry out of it. You can't do anything with a diamond until you take it out of the rock and then polish it and cut it, and then you've got a diamond. It's similar with the qualities of love and kindness and compassion and wisdom and power and so forth that we all have within ourselves, but it's like that diamond inside the rock. Now the difference is that with a diamond inside the rock, you generally use it for something useless. You make a big ring. You make earrings, you make a necklace, you make a watch, and that really has no use. You make something really beautiful with diamonds, and then when you die, you can't take it with you. And then even worse than that, you leave it to your descendants, and 150 years later, they look at it and they say, oh, I could never wear something like this. Right? It's just useless. And the qualities of Buddha are different. So we have to think about what the qualities of a Buddha are. And there are many ways that we can approach this, but one of the ways to think about the qualities of the Buddha is like to think about the praises that other people have written of the Buddha later. And in particular, there is a set of praises by an Indian master named Matracheta, who lived in probably the 4th or 5th century. These became really well known. He wrote 150 verses. They're very well known in Chinese. There's a translation by Yi Jing that's very well known in Chinese and very popular. And the original Sanskrit verses were very popular in India. There's a Tibetan translation, but it never became popular in Tibet, probably because it's actually not that great a translation, unfortunately. So they're beautiful verses originally, and the Gyalwang Karmapa suggested to me that I translate them, and I'm in the process of translating. I've gone through a bit of editing. There's still some more editing and so forth to do on the translation, but I thought I could share a few verses today. And we could think about what the qualities of the Buddha are, as someone who has purified all the faults and developed all the qualities. So the beginning of Madhuracheta's verses read, "The only one whom it makes sense for the intelligent to praise, go to for refuge and venerate, whose teachings it makes sense to follow, is him who has no faults at all in any time or any way, in whom as well all qualities reside in every respect." So in this way, the second verse is talking about this clearly. The Buddha has no faults at all in any time or any way. He's just completely free of faults. Why is the Buddha completely free of faults? Because the Buddha has completely understood and known his own nature, which is the same as everyone's nature, the same as the nature of everything, the Buddha nature. He's completely manifested and known this Buddha nature. So he has no more ignorance, nor even, and because he has no ignorance, nothing covering it up, then the qualities that are inherent within our own being have become manifest in him. So in whom as well all qualities reside in every respect. I bow to you, the self-arisen, whose wondrous works are infinite, whose qualities are too numerous and powerful to fathom. So with our own conceptual minds, we can't understand the qualities of a Buddha because they're just beyond what we can think of. We're limited because our conceptual mind is limited by our own ignorance, by our own habits of thinking about things inappropriately, by our misunderstandings. And those lead to our own greed and attachment, pride, and so forth. So we aren't able to release the qualities. But they're qualities that are inherent in us. So the Buddha, when we talk about a Buddha, we're talking about someone who has eliminated all of the obscurations that hide the qualities that are inherent within him. So you weakened and uprooted the faults, increased and purified qualities, and reached, because of this wise conduct, the highest accomplishment. So the Buddha started out just as someone just like us. The Buddha was an ordinary sentient being. There is the story of when the Buddha first accumulated merit on the path to Buddhahood. He was just a regular poor Brahmin farmer. I guess we're not farmers these days, but maybe some of us may be. Of course, there are farmers these days, but many of us don't work on the farm. But still, just a regular poor being, not even like someone rich and famous, just a poor person. Someone like these days, you'd see someone who's working at the grocery store and you think, oh, they don't have any qualities or something. The Buddha was someone just like that. And the Buddha heard of another Buddha at that time, whose name was Shakyamuni. This is very, very long ago. The same name as the Buddha had in this lifetime. There was a Buddha with the same name long ago. And he thought to himself, I'm just a poor Brahmin. I'm just a poor farmer. I have nothing. All I have is a bowl of thin soup, thin gruel, like kanji, not even good kanji, for myself to drink for lunch. I don't have anything else. I wish I could give this to the Buddha Shakyamuni. But he's going to go to some rich person's house. But the Buddha at that time knew. He knew, because he's a Buddha. When you get rid of all your faults, then you have like omniscient wisdom, which means you can know what's important. He was able to read his mind and came. And this poor farmer was just so delighted to see the Buddha that he offered his kanji, he offered his gruel to the Buddha. And the Buddha accepted it and drank it with great joy. He was delighted. And the farmer was delighted, and he made the aspiration, may I be just like you. In the same life, the same name, same everything, may I be just the same as you. And as a result of that, the Buddha became, that farmer became the Buddha of our time. This is the same for us. We might be, no matter where we are, if we make that same aspiration, that same wish, and then we engage in the training to achieve it, then we too can become Buddhas, just like the Buddha. So this is the difference between thinking of the Buddha as a god and the way we think about the Buddha in Buddhism. So if you think about the God, a God is someone you can never become, because the God is God and we're human. In Christianity, they talk about the God having one sort of nature and the humans having another sort of nature, and then they have this really difficult problem of saying, well, what is the nature of Jesus? It's a big problem in Christian philosophy. In Buddhism, we don't have that problem because everyone has the same nature. We have that Buddha within ourselves. We just have to let it out. So how do we let the Buddha out? There's a verse. I have to apologize for this. I spend too much time looking at philosophy and difficult topics. There's a verse by a 4th century master named Dignaga, where he writes in praise of the Buddha, I bow to him who became valid, the one who wishes to help beings, the teacher, Sugata, and protector. So what this means is that the Buddha became valid. The Buddha became a teacher who we can trust. Someone authoritative, someone who taught us what we can become. And how did he do this? First, because he had the wish to help beings. He had loving kindness, the wish to make sentient beings happy, and the thought, not only do I want beings to be happy, I want to do something about it. I want to help sentient beings. And because of this, he learned the Dharma, he studied the Dharma, he began to teach to other beings. And through the process of this, then he became a Buddha, the Sugata, the one who has gone to the excellence, the one who has become perfectly good, and the protector for sentient beings. This is what Dignaga said, and actually this is not just a philosopher, it's something that the Buddha himself said. The Buddha was talking with his half-brother, his younger half-brother Nanda. The Buddha said, what do you think, Nanda? Does the Tathagata speak words that are misleading? No, Venerable One, said Nanda. Excellent, Nanda, excellent. It is improper for the Tathagata to say words that are misleading, and there is no opportunity for it. Nanda, the Tathagata speaks the correct. He speaks the truth. He speaks the Dharma. He speaks suchness. He speaks unerringly. In other words, the Buddha says words that we can count on, that you can trust, that you can say, these are words that if I follow, I can also achieve Buddhahood. These are the true and unmistaken words that I can follow. And so why is it that he can say it? It's as the Buddha said, for a long time, the Tathagata has wished to benefit this world. The Buddha had the wish, I want to help all sentient beings. He has wished it happiness. He has wished it accomplishment and happiness. He has known the path. So that's the loving kindness that you need to develop in order to become a Buddha. He had that loving kindness, and because he had that loving kindness, that inspired him to practice the path. He did it. Because he did it, we can do it too. The same nature, the same. He has known the path, accomplished the path, taught the path, described the path, and completely guided the path. He's brought beings down the path. And so because of this, he achieved the result of bringing perfect benefit for himself in terms of saying the Tathagata is the Arhat, completely perfect Buddha, the one with awareness and conduct, the Sugata, the one who knows the world. But it's not just benefit for himself. He was able, because he knew his own nature, he was able to bring all other sentient beings to that state of Buddhahood himself. So he was the charioteer who tames beings, the unsurpassable, the teacher of gods and humans, the Bhagavan Buddha. So when we think about what the Buddha is someone who originally was a being just like ourselves, developed the wish, thinking about someone who took his own pains and unhappinesses and difficulties this lifetime as like an example and realized, well, no matter what, no matter where I'm born, no matter what situation I'm in, I'm going to be affected by these same pains and difficulties. It's going to be hard for me, right? No matter what. I mean, you can be the richest person in the world. If we take like the example of like Elon Musk, does he seem like a happy person? I mean, he's doing a lot of stuff, but he's always insulting people and doing like on Twitter, right? Does he seem like a really happy person? Not really. So he's as rich as Croesus, as we say in English. You know, he's extremely rich, but it didn't make him happy. So if we want to do something that's going to bring ourselves happiness, then actually we have to think about it by first wanting to bring others happiness. So the Buddha had that wish. What can I do to make other beings happy? What can I do? And then he realized he had to train the path. And this is the path that the Buddha taught, that all the Buddhas of the past taught, that they all followed to achieve the state of Buddhahood. And he did it not for his own benefit. So to go back to Mataracheta's verses, he says, you shook off any consideration of whether you should act or not, and of your own accord took on protecting this defenseless world. So no one said, please protect me. The Buddha looked and he realized from himself, he says, if I'm going to help myself, I have to help everyone else. It's only by making other sentient beings happy that we can really become happy ourselves. You can think about it on a small level of our own lifetime. When you have something nice and you keep it for yourself and you enjoy it for yourself, it's nice. When you have something nice and you give it to someone else or you share it with someone else, then there's a different sort of happiness that comes from it, a somewhat purer sort of happiness. And so that's what the Buddha realized. And of his own accord, he took on the idea that he had to protect this defenseless world. Without being asked, you acted well. Without any reason, you were kind. To strangers, you were a good friend. To outsiders, you were family. So this is Mataracheta not talking about the Buddha in his final lifetime. This is Mataracheta talking about the Bodhisattva, the being who would become the Buddha. What he did on the path. He was kind to people. He wanted to help people. He wanted to help beings. He wanted to be a good friend to everyone, even if they didn't want to be his own friend. If you would give your very own flesh what need to mention other things so kind, and you would even give your life to those who asked to it. When we read the Jataka tales, the stories of the Buddha's previous lifetimes, there are so many stories of the Buddha willingly sacrificing his life for the benefit of others. Like we have a monastery, a Trungpa monastery. Our main monastery is in Namo Buddha, which is the place where the Buddha sacrificed his body to a starving tigress. And that's not the only. There is a story of the time that someone asked him for a pound of flesh, so he cut off a big piece of his thigh and gave it to them. Even though it hurt, because he realized that doing that would bring more benefit to the other person, and that thereby he would also be able to become Buddha. So disregarding any pain, even when wounded more than once, you alone, hero, knew the essence of the compassion that you felt for beings, even your murderers. The seed of perfect enlightenment, this jewel of mind, is far beyond anyone else's comprehension. It's not that it's actually beyond our comprehension. It's a nature of compassion that we can develop, because the Buddha was the same as us. The only difference is that we haven't gone as far along the path as the Buddha did. So we need to have the intention, what can I do to help sentient beings? And then we need to embark on the training. How do I do this? How do I develop the loving kindness? And when you have loving kindness, you wish that all beings be happy. Then you see them suffering and you think, well, what can I do to free them from happiness? Or to free them from the suffering that prevents them from being happiness? So you develop compassion. And you think about, why are these beings suffering? It's because of their afflictions. It's not like, for example, someone like Elon Musk, and although I don't really know, looking from the outside, it seems like he might be a kind of tortured and unhappy person. I can't really tell. But if you look at what he spouts out, sometimes it doesn't seem like he's happy to me. But what makes him unhappy? It's not that he's a bad person. It's not that in essence he's bad. It's that, like all of us, he's got mistaken ways of thinking that then make him act in ways that create unhappiness for himself and others, just the same as us. So in this way, you think about yourself, if you think about all the times you've done something that has harmed someone else, why is it? It's because of your own misunderstanding, and your own misunderstanding leading to you to act out of greed or to act out of anger, hatred, pride, or so forth, that then causes some sort of harm, sometimes seemingly small, sometimes seemingly large. Doesn't really matter. It causes harm to other beings. And it also causes harm to you, because every time we act on something that's negative, then we're kind of imprinting it within ourselves and making habits that grow stronger and stronger. So we need to instead work on developing the habits that will lead us to purify ourselves so that we won't act in those negative ways and instead create habits of acting in good ways. And as you act in good ways, those good ways of acting, actions that come out of the wish to help others, the wish that other beings be happy, the wish to free other sentient beings from suffering, these are actually just part of your own nature. And so it's like letting a little bit of the nature within you out. If you have a light that is inside a solid, ceramic, I mean, like you can buy the tea lights with ceramic lamps on them, like ceramic coverings over them. And if those ceramic coverings have no holes in them, the light's not going to go anywhere. You have to have holes in it that let the light out. And the more holes in it, the more the light goes out. Likewise, within our being, the more we meditate on loving kindness and compassion, the more we develop bodhicitta, the more we develop our own good qualities, then the more we're just actually letting the loving kindness and compassion and wisdom that is inherent within ourselves out. It's not actually doing anything. It's doing the same thing as the Buddha. He removed all the faults. See, so it takes a long time. It's like you've got lots of layers of faults to get out, to get off. And when you take those off, then the loving kindness and compassion and wisdom within ourselves just shines forth. And that's developing. This is the path that we need to go through. It's the path that the Buddha himself followed. And it starts from developing loving kindness. The wish that other beings be happy, the wish to help other sentient beings. What can I do to help other sentient beings? And this wish to benefit other sentient beings, we think of it like there is only so far you can go. But actually, loving kindness isn't like that. The more you cultivate loving kindness, the stronger it gets. And it can expand infinitely. The reason it can expand infinitely is because it's a quality of our mind, and our mind is not limited by anything other than our own ignorance. If you remove the ignorance, if you meditate on loving kindness and help break through the ignorance, then the nature of the mind can just be released and can grow infinitely. So if you have certain qualities, like if you want to practice jumping, you can only jump a certain amount. No matter how much you train, an Olympic high jumper can only jump, 2.5, 3 meters. I don't know how high they can jump these days. They can only jump a little bit. They aren't going to be able to jump 6 meters. That's in the pole vault, that they can do 6 meters. But a high jumper can't do 6 meters. There's only so far that a human body can jump because there are limits of the body. But the mind isn't like that. There are no limits if you develop it. If you try, you can develop loving kindness that's not limited. So what limits our loving kindness? It's the idea that we have loving kindness for some people and not for others. We have loving kindness for our family and our friends. We have aversion to the people who we think are going to hurt our families and friends, and we have complete indifference to everyone in between. So, but there's no reason why we can't develop loving kindness that will actually be not just for ourselves, but also for the people we dislike or people we think are our enemies, and for the people who we just don't care about. So there's no limit, because there's no limit to sentient beings. There's no limit to the number of beings you can have loving kindness for. And as you develop that loving kindness further and further, then it expands infinitely to all infinite sentient beings. And when you have loving kindness, then that leads to compassion. So that compassion then motivates us to really want to do, because loving someone is something, but then when you love them and you see them suffering, you want to free them from that suffering, right? Now often we think that there's nothing we can do, but the Buddha saw that there is something we can do. Even if it doesn't help sentient beings in the short term, we can develop our own qualities, become a Buddha, so that then we can know how to teach the Dharma in a way that that will benefit that being, so that no matter what external circumstances there may be, they can be freed from the suffering, freed from the mental suffering of thinking, I'm sick, I'm hurt, I'm in pain. And so the Buddha had this great compassion, and he worked to develop it. And that really motivated him to practice the path so that he could become a Buddha. As it says, as Matacetta says, the afflictions have bound and fettered all these beings without distinction. To free all beings from the afflictions, you've long been fettered by compassion. Shall I pay homage to you first, or to the great compassion instead, because of which, though knowing its faults, you stayed for so long in samsara? So what do we, really, when you think about the Buddha, the Buddha, in the time when the Buddha was training, it's like a regular person like us, but he had great compassion. So what do we, when we pay homage to that being who would become the Buddha, what are we really paying homage to? Should we pay, is it that person or is it the great compassion? Of course, it's hard to tell the difference sometimes, right? But what is it? That's what Matacetta is saying. It's that great compassion that comes out of the loving kindness for all sentient beings. We have loving kindness that develops into great compassion. And because of that, we practice the path. We go through the perfect training of practicing discipline, developing our internal qualities. So neither from fear of lower realms nor from attachment to higher births, you cultivated discipline from purity of your heart alone. You abandoned the crooked forever and always practiced the straight and narrow. It is because of your pure actions that you traversed the only path. So the Buddha knew that in order to follow the path, he had to practice the discipline of giving up doing anything that would harm anyone, doing all he could to develop the virtuous qualities in his being, and then developing the ability to actually bring benefit to others. Now I'm saying he now because we always think of the Buddha in this lifetime as being a he, but the Buddha was not always human and not always male. There are stories of the Buddha. He was a dancing girl in one lifetime. There are stories of the Bodhisattva taking birth as an animal and so forth. The outside body is not a big deal. It doesn't matter. He was all sorts of beings in all sorts of situations. He was born in hell. He was born in all different realms over many, many lifetimes. And so it doesn't matter who he was or how, but he just developed the qualities in himself by practicing this discipline of avoiding doing anything to harm anyone, doing all he could to develop his good qualities, and doing as much as he could to benefit other sentient beings. And so never was there any limit to your pursuit of the superior, and thus among your distinctive traits there's no distinction of greater and lesser. So he brought all of his qualities to complete perfection. You can't say that the Buddha's loving kindness is better than the Buddha's compassion because both are complete, totally developed. So you can't say one's greater than the other. Like these days we say that some people might have some qualities and not others. They might be really good at math and terrible at biology, if you're in a school or something. They might be really good at cooking but terrible at accounting, or the other way around. The Buddha was perfect in everything that was important, perfect in terms of having the great love for all sentient beings, the great wisdom of the nature of all things, and the great ability to help all sentient beings in the way that matched what they were able to do. Because your heart was always pulled by great compassion, you never clung to even the most high of pleasures of the samadhis and their results. Sublime though they may be, such pleasures, which cannot be shared with anyone else, cause pain not benefit to the likes of you whose conduct is sublime. So often what happens is that when we're doing something, like when you're developing loving kindness, meditating on loving kindness can sometimes feel really good. You just feel love. It's like pure love. And it feels pleasant. And so what we want then is, I want to feel good again, so I'm going to meditate on loving kindness so that I feel good. You have an experience and it feels good, and then you want that experience again. But once you do that, it's like you're no longer meditating on loving kindness. You're thinking, I want this pleasant feeling. That's attachment. So that prevents you from doing it. That prevents you from actually developing the qualities. So actually, when we are doing meditation, when we're doing Buddhist practice, it doesn't matter how it feels. Sometimes it feels good. Sometimes it doesn't feel good. Sometimes when you're feeling loving kindness, it feels like wonderful. Sometimes when you do it, it's completely horrible because you see the suffering that all sentient beings are in. It's like if you have a mother seeing her only child being carried down a river, and she's unable to reach in and pull her child out. She has incredible love for that child, but she cannot do anything. There's that love that's unable to do anything. That's pain. It's love. It's positive, but it's painful. So it's not that you're looking for any particular feeling. Instead, we want to develop the qualities. What's good? We don't want to be attached to feeling good, because if we do, then we're only going to end up in some blank meditative state that at some point will end. So instead, we need to develop our qualities of loving kindness and compassion for all sentient beings as much as we can, and not worry about how it benefits, because if we get stuck in some state where we end up in a blissed out state for a very long time, then we can't do anything to help anyone else. If you're sitting there in meditation, the world could be burning and you'd never know. It doesn't help. It doesn't help anyone. So when we're actually doing meditation, we're not trying to close, especially in our Kagyu tradition, we're not trying to close ourselves off to the world. We're not closing our eyes and getting into a deep state. That doesn't help us. It actually just tricks us. Instead, we're trying to be able to rest in the nature of ourselves as it is, seeing it fully. When we hear about mindfulness practice and resting in the present moment, that's the first step. Resting in the present moment and then looking. What is its nature? Knowing what its nature is. So that you neither long nor act for miracles or the lions or talk of your own qualities is proof of your compassion. The Buddha didn't practice compassion so that everyone think, what a wonderful being. What a great person. He didn't practice Buddhism thinking, I'll develop some great power to help other sentient beings and then everyone will look at me and say, what a great person. The Buddha did it purely for the sake of other beings, not caring about how it is. So sometimes when we're meditating, or sometimes when we're practicing Buddhism, we sometimes think we want other people to see how we're doing, what we're doing, so that it's this little nasty thought that's kind of in the back of our minds sometimes. And if that happens, it's normal. It's not a question of saying you're a good or bad person, but it's something that's, you have to notice it and realize that it's not for this, not for any benefit. That thinking in that way prevents you from developing the qualities. And so the Buddha acted fully for his own, for others' benefit, and didn't care about his own. So his compassion was actually kind of cruel to him, as Matracheta says. Wholly beneficent to others, but merciless to its own support, the only one whom your compassion showed no compassion was you, protector. So the Buddha's compassion was so strong that he cared nothing of himself, and he was willing to sacrifice himself for other sentient beings. This willingness to sacrifice himself is not some alien quality that we can never develop. You can see lots of instances of people who are willing to sacrifice themselves for people they love, people they care about. An example I often think of are firefighters or rescue workers who will put themselves at great danger in order to rescue other people. Like there's an earthquake in Turkey. Was it last winter? And there are lots of people who risk their lives to dig through rubble in order to try to get people free, knowing that those mountains of rubble could collapse on them. So that same capacity is something we all have. So becoming a Buddha isn't about becoming something other than what you are. It's releasing what you are. It's thus your steadfastness would sometimes, for sake of benefiting others, have you cut in 100 pieces and tossed in all quarters like an offering. So the Buddha's compassion was, he didn't spare himself for others. Instead, he worked it entirely to benefit others. For only did it ever act according to your wishes and well. And even when it caused you harm, you never took offense. So the Buddha was, when the Buddha did sacrifice himself in his previous lifetimes, he never said, oh, poor me. He was always thinking, this is like something I'm doing. Yes, it hurts for a while, but in the long term, it's going to bring me benefit. It's like going to the dentist. You know, going to the dentist, if you're having a root canal, it's going to hurt, right? If you're having a tooth pulled or whatever, it's going to hurt. But you know that because you're having that momentarily or temporarily painful experience, that then you're going to feel more comfortable. Similarly, you undergo the hardships to achieve Buddhahood, and because of that, you can achieve the great qualities of the Buddha. This is the great compassion, and out of his great compassion, then the Buddha also taught the Dharma. And when he taught the Dharma, though, it's not like he was always saying nice things to everyone. Sometimes he had to speak a little bit sharply. He had to say, so when because we often think of when we're practicing, we often think that a Dharma teacher is only going to say nice and peaceful and kind things to us. But actually, sometimes they say things that we don't want to hear. Like the Buddha, like Matacetta says in his verses, mostly they are wholly sweet, though some, when needed, are otherwise. Your words accomplish benefit, so all indeed are spoken well. So the Buddha sometimes did speak in ways that were harsh to people. And there are some ways where, there are some passages in the Vinaya, which I'm not going to go into right now, or in the sutras, where the Buddha said things to people that would probably lead to him being canceled on the internet culture these days, right? He said things that people would just not want to hear, because he knew that by saying them and by pricking that person in that way, that would help that person. It's like, and we see this with a lot of teachers. If you're finding a teacher who's always flattering you and saying nice things, they're not getting at your problems. What you have to do is you have to find out where your faults are. We want to remove our faults so that we can develop so that we can release the qualities that are inherent within ourselves, right? And in order to do that, we have to recognize the faults. And so sometimes the teacher is going to say to you things that you just don't want to hear. And even though it may be painful when they do say things like that, it's actually the most beneficial for me. So, I mean, some of the things that have been most helpful for me are the things that my teachers, Kenshin Trungpa Rinpoche and the Karmapa and other teachers have said that have actually been very painful at the time that I heard them, and mainly painful because I recognized that what they were saying was right, that there is a fault, there is a problem that I had to deal with. So some are gentle, some of the Buddha's words, some are gentle, some are sharp, and others have both qualities. And yet your words, when analyzed, are all of the one same flavor. Amazing such the consummate skill of your completely pure activity that fashioned such a vessel as this for the pure jewels of your speech. So the Buddha's speech was always beneficial to other people. And this is because he trained for such a long time, doing meritorious acts, doing good things, and creating habits of doing good things from lifetime after lifetime, so that he was then able to become this being who could say these wonderful things. So captivating to the ear are these, the words that pour forth from your mouth, so pleasing to the eye, like nectar streaming from the moon. Your speech is like a cloud of rain that settles down the dust of desire. Like a Garuda in the sky, it drives away the snake of hatred. So the Buddha's words, whether pleasing or displeasing, would help us overcome our own desire, our hatred, and all of our other faults. It's like the sun repeatedly dispelling cataracts of ignorance, and it is like the weapon of chakra shattering the mountains of pride. So the Buddha's words help us. By listening to the Buddha's words, they help us overcome our own faults so that we can then develop the same qualities of the Buddha, so that we can follow the same path that the Buddha followed, so that we can become just like the Buddha, so that we can become Buddhas ourselves. This is something that we can do. It's not something that's foreign to us or that's beyond ourselves. It's something that's part of our innate potential. We just have to let it out. And so the result of the Buddha being like this, the result of the Buddha developing loving kindness and training in the path and teaching and becoming this is that he achieved the perfect benefit for himself. He became a Buddha so that he was completely free not only of all suffering, but of any misconception or any slight bit of ignorance that would prevent him from being able to help other sentient beings. There are different stages where we can get to. If you get to the stage of like a great arhat, like Shariputra Maudgalyana, you can overcome your ignorance so that you are free of any suffering yourself. But you're not able to help all sentient beings. So how can we become able to help all sentient beings? That we have to follow the path of the Buddha so that we can remove all of the residual levels of ignorance that prevent us from seeing the true nature as it really is and completely. So instead of just seeing a part of it, like the great beings such as Shariputra Maudgalyana, the great arhats, this is not to say that they're slackers by any stretch, but they're just not Buddhas yet. We have to overcome all of the habits, all the misconceptions of the nature of things. And then we can become someone who's free of all the stains, someone who's able to just rest in the nature of things as they are. So the Buddha, in the end, has the benefit for himself of not having any stains. As Matarachetta says, not envious of superiors, disdainful of inferiors, or competitive with equals, you became foremost in the world. So the Buddha became like the greatest being in the world by overcoming all of his dualistic thoughts of comparing himself to others, me and you, acting on this subtle misconception of self and other. And how did he get there? It wasn't because he wanted to develop some particular qualities, it's because he worked on the causes. And this is important. You were intent upon the causes of qualities, not the results. Because of this, through the right practice, in you the qualities reach perfection. So this is like, if you want to be able to really do something really, really well, you have to work on you have to think about, I want to be able to do like for example, if you study music and you play piano, or you play the violin or cello or whatever, you might think, I want to learn how to play this really difficult concerto or something like that. Or maybe you play guitar or something, I don't know. You want to play guitar like, I'm going to show my age, like Eddie Van Halen, I don't know. Or Jimmy Page, I don't know, whoever is your guitar hero. If you start out trying to do exactly like they did, like whether classical music or rock or whatever you're trying to do, and try to do what the virtuoso thinks, you're going to fail. You have to first start by learning the technique. You have to learn how to press the keys on the piano properly to get a nice sound. You have to learn how to pluck or bow or do whatever. You have to do the causes. So the same thing when we're working on Buddhism, we have to learn how to think about what are the causes of what we're doing, not thinking about the results. So we do meditation. For example, here we do green Tara meditation every morning. We do Chenrezig on Saturday mornings, and Medicine Buddha on Sunday mornings. We do Mahakal every day. So when you do these, you might think to yourself, oh, well, I want to be just like green Tara. And so if you are practicing this with the motivation, I want to have a vision of green Tara. I want to see myself as green Tara. This is like the result. You're not actually going to be able to get there and be stable. Instead, you have to think about, well, what are the causes? The causes are, first of all, developing the perfect motivation, loving kindness, compassion, and bodhicitta. Then following the technique, which is also the causes, reciting properly, meditating properly, maintaining mindfulness and awareness, not being attached. And when you do this, then the result of this is naturally that the result will come because you're doing the causes. You have to build up from the ground up. So you're building the basis. So you need to really cultivate the basis, starting from the motivation. You can do the most advanced practice in the world. You can do Mahamudra, Dzogchen, or Kalachakra, or all the practices that everyone gets really excited about. I mean, when you are advertising a Dharma event, if you say, we're going to talk about the basic qualities of love and compassion, a few people show up. If you say, Mahamudra, Dzogchen, Kalachakra, 10 times as many people will show up. But if you try to do those advanced practices and you don't have the basis of a proper motivation, they are not going to benefit you. You may have temporary experiences where you have incredible visions. You may have dreams. You may have this. You may have that. Whatever you have, whatever experience you have, it's going to be hollow. So you have to start from the basics. Like this is why, like the Dalai Lama, people always complain. The Dalai Lama only teaches about the 8 verses that train the mind, which teaches compassion. The way of the Bodhisattva, which teaches what? Bodhicitta. He doesn't even spend much time on the wisdom chapter. You get to the wisdom chapter and the teaching by the Dalai Lama, and he says, oh, and then there's this wisdom chapter. Okay. So he reads the first few verses and then he skips to the end. And then you have these really 37 practices of the Bodhisattva. These are the teachings that he teaches. They teach the foundation. And there are all these people saying, oh, he should give teachings on the Guhya Samaja Tantra. He should give teachings on the Kalachakra. He should this and that. And people ask him for that, and he says, well, okay, I should be teaching this. And then what does he teach? Being kind. Being a good person. So we shouldn't be thinking about some high teaching because we're not ready for it. Unless you really have that compassion where you just look at any other sentient being, even an ant, even someone horrible, and you just have like overwhelming feeling as if you're that mother standing by the side of the stream watching her daughter being carried off. If we don't have that compassion, then we're not really going to be able to develop it. Now, it takes a while to get to that compassion. You might think to yourself, listening to me, oh, well, I'm never going to get there. I can't do that. But we can. We just have to take it a step at a time. It takes a while. So you start thinking about the people who are close to you and thinking, how would you feel if they were sick in the hospital? What would you do? You know, and many of us, we have aging parents or whatever. We think, oh, if they have health problems, what are you going to do when your parents get sick? You really want to do something to help them, even if there's nothing you can do. Or you might have children of your own. Actually, last year when I was in Nepal, a friend who came to Rinpoche's teachings for many, many years, and then didn't come for a while, he finally came back, and he had been a practitioner for a very long time. He was probably, I think, he must be in his 70s now. And he has a beautiful 6-year-old daughter. And when we met, and his wife, who's also a practitioner, and this beautiful little 6-year-old daughter were there. And what he said is like, now that he has a child of his own, and he thinks about the Buddha, or all these masters who love every sentient being exactly the same way he loves that little girl. So when you think about your own children or your own parents and think about how you feel for them, and to have that same love for all sentient beings as we do for, this little helpless worm who depends on us for everything. So that's the type of compassion we have to develop. And you start by thinking about people for close to you, and then you move to people further, people in your community, your friends, your community, and so forth. So that you have that same compassion for all sentient beings. When we're going out You see people. For example, I don't know if this is popular or not. I really like taking the bus um, because you get on the bus. I really like taking the MTR in Hong Kong, where there are like thousands of people on the same train, because there's nothing to do while you're going. You're standing on the train, or if you're lucky enough, you get a seat. Or you get a seat and you see someone else who needs it more, and you get up and let them have it. And you see all these people around you. Even taking the bus here in Richmond, you sit on the bus and there are other people there. There's nothing to do, because you can't make the bus go faster or slower. You just sit and you can think about all those other people on the bus with loving kindness and compassion. You can think, wouldn't it be nice? And this isn't thinking some sort of magical thing. It's like looking, but kind of surreptitiously. You don't want to look strange. You don't want people to realize what you're doing. You're not doing this to show up. It's not like you're looking, but you notice the other people, and if you think to yourself, wouldn't it be nice if all these other people are happy? You can do this. This is one reason why I really like taking the bus or the SkyTrain or whatever public transportation. So you can actually see other people, and there's nothing you can do except just meditate on wanting them to be happy. Wouldn't it be nice if these beings were happy? Wouldn't it be wonderful? What would be wrong with that? So this is how we can train ourselves, developing loving kindness and compassion. And when we do that, then we'll gradually develop our other qualities. We'll gradually remove the levels of ignorance and kind of let out the nature that's already within ourselves, and we ourselves can also become Buddhas. So this is, I think, an important thing for us to understand, the nature of what a Buddha is and the nature of how a Buddha became a Buddha, which means how can we also become Buddhas? So I think that's enough of me blathering on for today. I don't know if any of you have any questions. We have a little bit of time for some questions and answers. If you don't have questions, that's also fine. Oh yeah, this is a good question, and I'll repeat it for those of you in the back and those of you listening over the internet or whatever. When you speak about the Buddha sacrificing himself, are there times when this is not the best thing to do? And the answer is most definitely yes. The time when it is appropriate to sacrifice yourself for someone else is when you are able to do this completely out of compassion for someone else with no thought of yourself. And so this is a level that's beyond us. We talk about it and the Buddha doing it, but this is not where we are. And as it's very clearly said in Shantideva's Way of the Bodhisattva, that you don't do this before you're ready. The time you do it is when you can see that your own body is exactly the same in nature as like a piece of meat in the grocery store. I mean, you'd have no problem buying, you might not feel good about buying meat, but buying a piece of, but basically, yeah, I mean, like, if you cut it up and wrapped it in plastic, it would look exactly the same as the steaks in the grocery store, maybe a slightly different shape. There's no difference. So when you realize that your own body is the same as that, then you're able to do it. But before then, no, because we don't. We have too much clinging to ourselves. You don't want to do any giving that you can't do. So like Shantideva says, you start out by giving vegetables. Not even meat yet. You start out by giving vegetables. And then you work to the point where you can give larger and larger things. And then Shantideva says, and when you realize that your own body is the same as vegetables, then you can go ahead and sacrifice your body. But only at that level of realization. So it's something that's in the future. It's not for us. It's what's called difficult, extremely difficult giving. And you had a question also? Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so basically this question, it's a good question. As Buddhists, we talk about developing loving kindness and compassion, and this is all about training our own minds, but it's not actually doing things. Whereas you have people who are non-Buddhist who go places and help the poor, they actually do things to feed people, feed animals, take care of stray cats and so forth, and they actually do things that actually bring benefit to other people. So shouldn't we be doing things to benefit other beings ourselves? The answer is of course, yes. But if you don't train your mind first, then you're not going to go out and do it. For example, when you have someone who's naturally generous and who gives, well, they have that natural generosity. That's their character that they're born with. And because they have that natural generosity, they go out and they practice things. They give to the Red Cross or other places because they just naturally have that. Well, how can we develop that same quality of natural generosity? You have to develop the intention before you're actually going to go and give. And the more we develop the quality of natural generosity, then the more we're actually going to do it. Right? So you have to have the intention before you can actually give. So this person, when you think about it in terms of, this person may not accept this explanation, but the way we talk about it in Buddhism is that person has practiced generosity before and has great habits of generosity. That's why they're generous in this lifetime. So how do we become like them? Well, we train ourselves in loving kindness and we begin to practice generosity on whatever level we can. So this means that you go to the Red Cross and donate blood. They need blood. They called me the other day. They need blood, but they won't take my blood because I just came back from India a few weeks ago. Right. So they need blood. So you go and give blood. It only takes an hour. It's not hard. It doesn't hurt for most of us. You do what you can. And you make the gifts that you can. And actually, many of you who come along here, even if you kind of downplay it, you're actually really very generous people, just being here. Even giving your time to listen to someone else can be generous, or to protect some other being. And so you be generous in the ways that you can. Because if you do it in ways that you're not able to do it and you end up regretting it, it's not going to help you, it's not going to help the other beings. Right? So you be level on the generous that you can, and then you naturally, as you develop your generosity, you'll find yourself able to do more and more. And maybe when you've trained in generosity for enough lifetimes, you'll be that naturally generous person yourself, right? And then you can go beyond being that naturally generous person into being someone who can perfect all of those transcendent qualities of generosity, discipline, patience, and so forth, right? So it starts from having the intention. So you see someone who's acting like that, so you think, well, what do I need to do that? Well, I need to develop the wish to do it. Because if you don't have the wish, you're not going to do it. Yes? Mm-hmm. Yeah, excellent question. Yeah. Yeah, right. Excellent question. So, to repeat it for everyone in the back, sometimes people practice Buddhism and they get more and more self-centered and more egotistical. The more they do it, the more self-centered and like we talk in Buddhism about doing the opposite, and yet about becoming more selfless and helping other people, but actually often it happens that people get more and more egotistical the more they practice Buddhism. So what do we do to avoid this happening? And this really comes down again to our motivations, our wishes, and what we think about in the beginning. Because just coming to the shrine room, like you can come to any of our events or pujas or whatever you can come to, and if you do it with a wrong motivation, then it's just going to become another brick that you use to build up me, another piece of your ego clinging. So what this shows is that the people who are doing this look on the outside like they're practicing Buddhism, but on the inside they're not. They're doing the opposite. So what we have to do is first for ourselves is when you look at those persons, you say, oh, they're practicing Buddhism and they're becoming more and more egotistical, and you say, they're not doing it right. So the first thing you have to do is you have to learn how to do it right yourself. You have to make sure that you yourself are doing this as well as you can. So making sure that you're doing this not for yourself, not to become important, not to become a big person in the Dharma Center, but instead to become more peaceful, more kind, more generous, and so forth, to become a better person. And then, because of becoming a better person, then to be able to really progress down the path. So that starts again with really taking the teachings on loving kindness and compassion, really thinking about others more than yourself to heart. So it takes a long time. Now, when you're in a Dharma center or a monastery or wherever, and you see people who are doing the opposite, you don't think, they're doing it the wrong way and I'm doing it the right way, because then you're actually doing the same thing as them. You have to have understanding for such people for such people also, because they have really strong habits of ego clinging, and we have the same habits. They're just expressing it in a different way. So you have compassion and understanding for them. It's really important to have compassion and understanding for all of our Dharma brothers and sisters, so that we can all progress together. Sometimes a little bit ahead, sometimes a little bit behind. Sometimes we look and see faults in other people. Yeah. Right. Yeah, so sometimes you're doing something, it looks like it's really much better, and then the next day it's gone. You lose it. And why is that? It's because you get attached to thinking, this is good. I'm good. This is what I should be doing. This is the good experience. So that's clinging to the result. Instead, you have to think about the causes. Oh, why did this turn out well? It's because I was being mindful, aware, careful, watching my mind, not letting myself become motivated by pride or envy or anything like that. And then when you're focusing on developing those causes, then the results will naturally sometimes turn out good, sometimes turn out mixed, sometimes turn out bad, but you're focusing on the qualities which are, the mindfulness, awareness, carefulness, the good motivation of loving kindness. And as you develop those, then gradually things will get better and better naturally. But looking good on the outside is not what's important. What's important is thinking about what makes things work, what makes it be a good situation. It's really important when we're in the, because I tend to be a little bit aloof and stay in my room working a bit, but I hear stories sometimes, and I think, oh dear. And it's mainly because we're too busy thinking about other people without paying attention to our own faults. So when you see faults in someone else, then you should look and say, I have the same fault, and look for it in yourself. It's a reflection of your fault. When you see good things in other people, you should celebrate those qualities as being more precious than a Buddha. All right? Always look for the good in others, in other words. Should we do a little bit of meditation? Usually we end up these talks. It's hard to say usual anymore since it's been so long since I've been giving these talks regularly, but usually we would end these with a little bit of meditation. So shall we do a bit of meditation? Okay. I don't have a bell and I don't need it. We can just sit. So let's sit up straight and relax. Just rest. Open your eyes. Keep your eyes open. We're not closing off the world, as I said earlier. Keep your eyes open and relax. And then when you feel ready, you just start counting your breath. As you breathe out, that's 1. Then you breathe back in. You breathe out, that's 2. Then you breathe in, and so forth. Count up to 10 breaths. Relax. When you have thoughts that come, it's no problem. Let them come, and then let them go. There's no need to entertain them. They'll come and go on their own. So don't chase after the thoughts of the past. Don't anticipate the future. Just rest, letting it be. Relax. Sit comfortably. When you finish a session of meditation, and we don't necessarily have the time or the situation to do it here in a class, but when you are at home and doing your meditation, at the end of the meditation, don't just get up. Take a moment to think. Was I mindful? Was I aware? Did I get completely distracted? Think about, did you practice the causes of good meditation, being mindful and aware, having a good motivation and so forth? And then when you think to yourself, how was it? Then you can get up after you've done that. So take a few moments to kind of let the good experience, the good things that came out of the meditation to sink in a little bit, or to think about what you maybe need to try to do a little bit better next time. And then you can get up. Otherwise, if you just, I'm done meditating. 10 breaths. Okay, I'm gone. You're gone. If you take your time. Then also, dedicating the merit is really important. So we dedicate the merit by thinking that we've done this for the benefit of all sentient beings, to bring them happiness. Out of love for all sentient beings, to develop our own qualities for sentient beings, not for ourselves, but we give our own qualities all to other beings so that they may all truly be happy. So with this thought, let's recite the dedication of merit, which I think many of you know. It's on the very last page. Osanam de tam jese bani tomne nye peranam pam jete kyegana chi pala chobai sime tole roarsho. So thank you. Now, let's see. Because of Kyabje Trungpa Rinpoche passing away, and then I had to be in Nepal for a long time, and I'll have to go back to Nepal in October, and similarly for Lama Pema and Sangpo and everywhere else. It's like we're trying to pack 4 months of Dharma activities into one. And as a result, next weekend I have to go to the Kagyu Mulim in New York. I have to translate for Tulku Damche at the Kagyu Mulim in New York. Actually, I don't have to. It's a great opportunity for me. And it's helpful for him and for everyone else. And so I have to go. The weekend after that, we are having our annual Sedrup Long Life Bhaja. The weekend after that, I will be teaching in Maine. Teachings that I started in the beginning that I started in May and didn't finish, and so I have to finish them. If I don't finish them this year, who knows if I'll ever finish them, right? So I need to go do that because there's no guarantee. There's no guarantee I'll make it to then. I'll try my best. So I have to finish those. And then the weekend after that, I have a scheduled teaching on Buddha nature. So that's the schedule. So for a few weeks, I won't be able to teach on the Saturday afternoon regular slot, which is I really enjoy giving these talks. There are people who always come every week, and there are lots of people who listen over the internet. There are more people who listen over YouTube. I know that if I were to go back and look at the YouTube this evening, that there would be quite a few more people listening from far away. So I'm sorry that I'm not able to give more of these talks this year. I will be back at the end of September and be here for a few weeks, but then of course Trungpa Rinpoche's cremation is coming up, and there are events starting at the end of October, and there's a lot to be done, unfortunately. Fortunately, maybe. Anyways, thank you very much for coming today, and we'll do this as much as we can.